On Wednesday morning, what had been rumored for months was finally made public: the bloodbath at Bristol. ESPN laid off upwards of 100 employees, many of them on-air talent who had become very familiar faces to viewers over the last couple of decades. So where did the worldwide leader in sports lose its way?
All of the lights. Welcome back to the Six Pennies podcast. We actually only have four pennies here today. It's me and my boy Albert. Timmy is going to be out of commission for a while, so you're just going to be hearing our two voices.
Wait,
If
wait,
you don't already,
where's Timmy at?
he uh, he disappeared.
Oh,
We
okay.
tried calling him for kind of a haphazard or out of the blue podcast yesterday after the birth of his baby boy, but he didn't pick up. He's ignoring our calls for probably good reason. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But this is an unpaid leave. So
Nice.
Timmy, you're gonna have to take it up with the HR with all the money we're gonna be kind of piling in here.
Yeah,
Um,
all deals we close while he's away, he will not be privy to.
yeah, this is actually super terrible timing for him. But we can get into that a little later on, maybe this month. We got a few projects in the works here at Six Pennies Podcast. But for today, just wanted to touch base with Albie and just talk about ESPN. And there was a bloodbath this morning,
Man.
and it's been rumored for a while. It's kind of been a long time coming for a lot of people, but laid off 100 plus people, and a lot of them, really familiar names to us. So we'll just start. Let's start with what are your initial thoughts about all the ESPN cuts?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. It's been rumored for a few months now, and actually, it's kind of been a trend for ESPN the last few years. So they just laid off 100 people today, Wednesday, April 26th. But a couple years ago, they laid off like a few hundred, I think like 350 or 300 around there. And then a
Yeah,
couple years prior to that, they had a huge layoff, and I think that was like more than more than that, like 400 or 500 people, including like Stump the Schwab. I don't know if you remember that guy, but
yeah, I love that show.
yeah, and he got laid off in 2012, and he's still pretty bitter about it. And there's some stories relating, relating around his layoff there. But my initial reaction to today was, even though I knew it was happening, I was like following up with the news like a couple of days prior. But it's just sad to see like all these guys and women like tweet their farewells, and like, a lot of them are like, it's been a great 17 years. I made a lot of friends, a lot of memories, but at the end of the day, these guys are like, they're literally jobless. And I know the ones who have a lot of exposure might be able to find another job with other networks, but it just sucks, losing a job.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a really big reality check today. Even I feel like a lot of the people who lost their jobs, maybe us as sports fans or ESPN viewers, once in a while we would see them and we wouldn't really like their on-air personalities. But when
Yeah.
it comes down to it, like they lost their jobs, their livelihoods, and it's a pretty big deal. I mean, you hope for the best for them that they can find the next thing pretty soon, but some of these things you just never know. Um, so yeah, you're right. Just saw a lot of like really sad tweets today from people all over the ESPN world. I think the saddest one I saw came from Danny Cannell.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, Russell and Cannell show, and he said, "Poured my heart and soul on ESPN for the last 8 years. Moved my wife and three kids to Connecticut to go all in 5 years ago. Bummed it ended in 3 minutes, and it's just it's really sad. And to kind of counteract that, did you see kind of the overall message from ESPN president?
No, what did he say?
So John Skipper just released a memo to all the staff on ESPN, and it's like three sentences, or maybe this might just be an excerpt, but it's just said a necessary component of managing change involves constantly evaluating how we best utilize all of our resources, and that sometimes involves difficult decisions. These decisions impact talented people who have done great work for our company. I would like to thank all of them for their efforts and their many contributions to ESPN. It just sounds very cold,
Yeah,
and
super cold.
like very little sympathy. almost sounds like he copy and pasted it from just some template he googled. But yeah, really sad day.
But just, I mean, just playing devil's advocate, like we don't know how it is walking in his shoes as well, you know, because he has bosses he has to answer to from Disney, and so maybe he wanted to be cold, or he wanted to sound cold because he was getting the cold shoulder from people above him as well. So it's just a really tough situation when this huge, like, you know, they're the worldwide leader of sports, and so this huge like enterprise of over 100 million subscribers at their peak, and now that I think they're somewhere around like 80 million, which is, you know, 20% loss in the last couple of years is huge for a company that size, and so you have to make your cut somewhere, and it just sucks that some of these huge names like Ryan Russillo and Cannell, but you had like, you know, um, some of the Sports Center anchors like Jay Crawford and those guys also got the axe as well. So that it just sucks, man. I just remember like watching ESPN initially. I didn't have cable TV growing up, so I never watched ESPN. It was really just local TVs and the sports coverage from those channels. But when we got to college, like cable TV was free, and the first thing I
Yeah,
watched was ESPN and MTV. Like those were the two
yeah,
channels
for
that were
sure.
on 24/7, especially as freshman and sophomore. I can just remember like every night getting back from the gym or getting back from class or something, we would have SportsCenter on, and it would be playing for like 4, 5, 6 hours straight on a loop. And those were the days, man, like just hanging out in our rooms and watching SportsCenter and watching highlights.
Yeah, for sure. Back in college, ESPN. There, there were only two options that were always playing on the TV. It was either ESPN or it was MTV. With I loved that Yo Mama show. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those were always on TV. And but yeah, going back to first impressions, ESPN. Oh, by the way, so Cannell is gone, but Rosillo is still there.
Oh,
Just
okay.
wanted to clear that up. But yeah, back to first impressions. ESPN. I always look back and think about how my life would have been different if I hadn't been rejected or waitlisted from different colleges. And one of the colleges that I was planning to go to was the one my sister ended up going to, Northwestern.
Oh, yeah.
And
Huge
I just
communication school.
yeah, I just think, if I had gone there, I applied for like economics or something random like that, but I wonder if I had gone there and kind of gone the whole route of maybe switching over to communications or getting into journalism, and how my life might have been different. And in a lot of ways, especially back in the day, like ESPN just seemed like the ultimate dream job, right? Like
Yeah.
whether it was as an anchor or just something in their organization. Over time, I realized how kind of weird it was that it's in the middle of nowhere, in Bristol, Connecticut. So that's one big drawback from working there, maybe. But yeah, I kind of idolized ESPN back in the day. I even read the book called "Those Guys Have All the Fun," where it kind of goes interviews a bunch of ESPN guys and talks about the creation in the very beginning of ESPN and how they were the first ones to realize that people craved and people wanted sports 24/7.
Yeah. Did that book touch into any of like the different scandals that ESPN had to go through during the
Yeah,
last like
there
10, 15 years?
that there are a lot of drugs, a lot of sex, because I
Dang.
mean, it's talked about living in Bristol especially back then. Like there was literally nothing else. Uh, like if you were gonna hang out with anyone, it's gonna be your coworkers. So just a lot of long nights, and long nights lead to crazy stuff. So, um, but how about let's go on to the next question. So, what are your favorite ESPN programs? And I know you're not necessarily a fan anymore, but why did you stop watching those shows?
Yeah, so I loved like SportsCenter back in the day because you're right, it helped quench my thirst for the highlights, but also like it gave me a rundown of everything from that day. And this is really before like we were on our phones all the time, and this was before Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So the best way to get that type of information was either go on to your huge desktop PC, or just turn on the TV and it's
Yeah,
right there in front of you. With that being said, though, the my favorite part of ESPN the last like 10, 15 years definitely are the documentaries, specifically like 30 for 30 documentaries.
true.
And I know like Bill Simmons kind of spearheaded that movement. Um, and it was awesome to watch because it was more than sports. It was like the personal stories and the personal anecdotes behind the sports, and so that's what really drew me in, especially like the Detroit Pistons Bad Boys 30 for 30, like that really sticks
Yeah,
in my head. Like those are great. And it's funny that earlier you mentioned Northwestern, because there's a couple really big ESPN guys from Northwestern, like Mike Greenberg from Mike and Mike,
yeah.
and Mike
Wilbon.
Wilbon. Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, that would be crazy if I knew someone, if you were at ESPN and we started this Six Pennies podcast.
Yeah, it was crazy because, well, Wilbon, when I was at Northwestern visiting, or we were there for my sister's graduation, Wilbon was actually this commencement speaker.
Oh, nice.
Um, so we're both part of this Facebook group. Shout out to Sports Nuts, and we just talk about sports all the time there. And we're talking about kind of this bloodbath going on today or this week. And I was telling everyone, I don't even remember the last time I watched like anything on ESPN other than like live sports or 30 for 30s. So you and me both, we both love the 30 for 30 series. It's just some really good filmmaking. But back in the day, I would also watch Pardon the Interruption, PTI,
Oh
with
yeah.
Wilbon and Kornheiser, and Around the Horn. Um, and those were just really good. Like I would tune in specifically. Back then, it was also before the days of DVR, so you'd have to catch it live, and there was no streaming. You just had to be there in the room to watch it. So I definitely remember those two shows.
Yeah, the thing that sets those two shows apart is the synergy between, like, whether it's Wilbon and Kornheiser, or Reality and his team, is
Yeah,
they're just so natural. But then when you see like what's the first take and stuff like that with Stephen A. and Max Kellerman, and before that Stephen A. and Skip Bayless, like I don't know why it was so successful, but because you can tell it was so forced, and
like
you could
fabricated. Yeah,
yeah, and you could tell that they had to disagree with each other, so they were arguing for things they were not believing in, and so that's the difference between those shows versus PTI and Around the Horn. One thing like I remember about those two shows was when I would visit you guys at UT
yeah.
back in like freshman sophomore year. Was You're right, like we didn't have DVR or anything like that yet. So every time I was hanging out with you guys, Phil would make sure, our friend Phil Lee, he would make sure that we would be back, at 3 p.m. for Around the Horn and 3:30 for PTI.
Awesome.
And it's just like it's so true because it was like an event. It's kind of like when we would go play basketball at the gym and then people would leave for a show, specifically 24.
Yeah,
It
or
was
Lost or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was the same for these two shows. And I just remember how much our friend Jeremy Chu loved Woody Page, and like all the stuff that he would write in the
Blackboard.
yeah, the
Yeah,
blackboard behind him. Like those were the days, man. That was definitely peak ESPN.
those were the days. So let's, on the flip side of that, we both um, kind of went from the top to the bottom in terms of our ESPN fanhood. Um, and I saw an interesting quote today from Bob Lee, who I think is still employed at ESPN, maybe in a little lesser role, but he
Yeah, he
mentioned,
does the outside the lines.
okay, outside the lines. So he mentioned that, other networks had viewers, but ESPN had fans.
Mm.
So in terms of that, like, when did you stop being a fan of ESPN?
That's a great quote. Yeah, it's kind of like when you have fans of athletes, right? When you're a fan of an athlete, sometimes you drop off, whether it's like Kobe Bryant or Tiger Woods or something, like something outside of the sport happened, and so you can't really defend what they do, and you can't be a fan.
Yeah,
And then the same goes with ESPN people. So if they become like overly annoying, or if they become they're just like a clown show, you know. They're not being genuine, and that's what
Yeah,
I feel like Stephen A. and Skip Bayless and those people, they created this like atmosphere of
it's
just,
like a circus.
yeah, just fabricating information. And so I that's when I was like, okay, these guys and this network is really just trying to grab headlines
Yeah,
instead of like report news. And so that's when it really like fell off for me.
yeah, I agree. That's a good call. That's kind of how I feel about Tiger Woods. Going back to your fandom of him, like it wasn't anything on the course, obviously, that he did. It's just it got harder and harder to cheer for him.
Yeah.
And when it came to ESPN, I remember like I would always stay up to watch the highlights, and if I missed the first one, then I'd stay up another
Yeah.
2 hours and watch the next one. Like
Yeah.
there, first of all, there's no other option back then, but second of all, like they just had good, like it was good play by play. It was good, just not necessarily reporting, but just commentating on the actual highlights.
Yeah.
Like it made it really interesting, really fun, and really quotable. But I think I can't remember exactly when it was, but I started to kind of realize how much like West Coast and East Coast bias ESPN had, and like it was always about the Lakers or the Celtics, and was really annoyed. Like the Rockets would have like a really good game, and I just wanted to see the Rockets highlights. That's all I wanted to see, and I would
Yeah.
wait 2 hours and see like a 30-second clip, and other than that, they'd spend the rest of the time talking about some Boston team or something like that, and it really started to piss me off. Um, but I think the moment that they really started to lose their way was, um, well, apparently they lost a bunch of money covering the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
And so the World Cup, and also way back in the day, you remember when Tebow Mania was at its peak. I think I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but producers were pretty much pressured from way up top. Like they had to have some mention of Tebow in every single show, and I think that's when it started to get a little more political, a little more um, just I don't know what the word for it is, but less real. And instead of talking about this actual sports news, they try to just hit certain markets, and really it is like just name dropping.
Yeah, I think ESPN definitely lost a lot of money in the World Cup, but they also like misplayed instead of signing with UFC and letting UFC go to Fox. Like that was a
Yeah,
huge misplay. Losing the bid to NBC for the Olympics, stuff like that. Um, they just went for the wrong things, like the World Cup, the European Cup, and then like X Games and stuff like that. Like those are all money losing ventures, and so I guess they're paying for it now.
actually, yeah, that's true. Talking about back at the Olympics, I remember like I would turn over to ESPN during prime time to try to catch like some Olympic, highlights or something. And I remember, or maybe it was just the one I watched, but they were only allowed to show like the still shots, so there was
Yeah,
no video coverage of any of the highlights.
which is so
Um,
like old school, like
that's crazy.
1960s or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, I have this saying now. Friends don't let friends watch ESPN. So whenever any of my friends are complaining on Twitter or Facebook about how little coverage or how skewed the coverage is on ESPN, I just mentioned that. It is especially evident just this past week with the Rockets disposing of the Thunder in 5 games, but still every single headline was all about Westbrook and his triple doubles and just his stats. So, um,
Yeah, I
but
mean to expand on like their yearning to grab headlines and stuff. Like a lot of people consider they don't even consider ESPN anymore. Like their nickname now is like TMZPN or
yeah.
um they're a lot of people also consider ESPN like just a bunch of liberals. Like how do you react to that?
Yeah, I saw that. It just sucks when stuff like that becomes like part of a political agenda, and you can definitely see it. I mean, here and there, they're definitely more liberal, but at the same time, I think it just goes to show big picture how they kind of lost their way, right? Like instead of just sticking to sports, sticking to their lane, sticking to what they know,
Hmm.
they kind of try to branch out too far too fast. I feel like so we're looking at a running list of all the ESPN layoffs from today. Um, Going through the list, like who will you miss the most?
Man, there's so many people, and being from Dallas, there's actually a lot of Dallas ties as well.
Yeah, true. Werder.
Yeah, so Ed Werder, who's like a senior ESPN NFL analyst. You know, a lot of people know him from just reporting from Valley Ranch or reporting from the Star here in Dallas regarding the Cowboys. He actually started his career as a beat writer with the Cowboys, and so that's how he built his name and built his following. And then he signed with ESPN like I don't know 20 years ago, and so it's definitely sad to see him go. Which I don't understand why, if you're gonna let Eduardo go, like why keep Sal Palantonio? Because he's basically the Eagles' equivalent to Ed Warder. So it's like, why are they picking and choosing who to go and who to leave, even though they're doing the same thing? Outside of that, I honestly can't say I'm gonna like genuinely miss any of these people. I think they're all good people and good at what they do. But I'm really not gonna miss any of them. I will say there are a couple of people at ESPN who I wish they were either fired or let go or like just down or just like change
Move to a
responsibilities.
different role. Yeah.
Yeah, like Stephen A. Smith. Like, why is he the face of ESPN right now? Like, do people really believe his act or believe what he's saying? Because it's so like 100% not genuine.
Screaming A. Smith. Yeah.
Screaming A. Smith, and then the other guy that I mean, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I just think he's just too old and he needs to retire. He
I know
needs to
you're
be
talking.
like yeah, he needs to be like a senior consultant where they only like put on TV once every year or something, but Hubie Brown, man, why is he still on TV? Why do I hear his voice when I watch basketball games? Like give me someone who knows about current stats, current players, the current trends of the NBA because every time he's on, he's either getting calls completely wrong
Yeah.
or he's like giving me a story about like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or something. Like, really? Like,
From 30
I
years
don't,
ago. Yeah.
yeah, I don't really care about that. So,
That is such a good call with Hubie. Man, he puts me to sleep. I like he doesn't bring anything new. He just literally tells us exactly what just happened. But he's like the color commentary guy. um, and he'll be like, "No, that was a good play because," and then he'll just literally just recount what the play-by-play guy just said.
and
Um,
he'll always be on the side of the referee, no matter what. Like, no matter what. And it's like, are you serious? And I think maybe he is serious because he probably can't see it. He can't see the play like quick enough because he's too old.
yeah, I definitely agree with you on Hubie. A couple of guys that I'll miss. Jason Stark. He's like a
Oh
long-time baseball
yeah.
guy, and it's just sad. Like he's been there like 18, 20 years, and just think about one of us if you're at a company for that long, and it all kind of ended in a couple minutes. It's just crazy to think about. Um, Another guy is Chris Berman. I think he's still with ESPN, but in a much lesser role. He's not doing, or at least it's been years since I've seen him do Sports Center or anything like that. But he was iconic. Like all of his stuff was very quotable. Very he was in a movie, The Longest Yard, and they
Yeah.
had him as a commentator there too. Um, so yeah, definitely we're gonna miss a lot of people at ESPN, and there's a couple of people we wish we were missing as well.
Yeah, and I mean there are a couple people who I'm glad are still there, even though I don't really watch the show. I
Yeah,
do try to catch a highlight here or there, or every time there's a live sporting event, they'll still have these guys on TV, like SVP. I'm a huge fan of his, and
yeah,
then even though
Dave,
they've taken a step back, Jalen and Jacoby are still there, so
yeah,
at least they're not fired and like wrecking shop on Twitter right now.
yeah. Those three and JVG.
Oh yeah, true.
They, they got rid of JVG. There's literally no reason to watch ESPN anymore.
Yeah, that I agree with you because he's definitely the best NBA person by far,
Yeah,
and then
you'll.
Schefter for the NFL.
Oh yeah, Man, what would they would do without Schefter? Like
Yeah.
their their entire Twitter game would fall
I
off
do
the
want
cliff.
to I do want to touch base on like some of the sports they basically completely let go. So
Yeah,
I mentioned earlier like the X Games. So any of those like extreme sports, like those guys were all let go, and then definitely the National Hockey League, like all of
yeah,
their sportscasters, consultants, analysts, they were let go today, and so basically ESPN just canned hockey completely as a sport.
yeah. I don't know who they're even gonna have cover anymore. Is it just that one guy with the slick back hair?
Barry Melrose.
Yeah, I'm guessing he's the only guy left, right?
I guess it's him, but now he's gonna have so much leverage that he can probably just renegotiate or find another network to join.
All right,
It's almost like a sinking ship, you know. Like you kind of want to get off before it sinks.
it's just got to be tough. Like even though there are rumors of it for at least a few months, if not years, it when it finally hits, it's been a crazy day. All right, so any other thoughts about just the ESPN? I just want to say bloodbath again.
No, that's it. Every time you say bloodbath, though, shout out to Titus and Josh Ma. It's a map on StarCraft, and that's the first thing that pops into my head.
All right, so thanks everyone for tuning in today. Um, give a quick shout out to our couple pennies that are missing, Timmy Chu.
We miss you,
Uh,
Timmy.
yeah, Missy Timmy, come back. But we're still not splitting this money with you. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Please follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube.